Hello. My name is Thalassa Whitlow, and at my own family dinner, my father raised a glass to mock my love life. My sister called me a tragedy, and the rest laughed like I wasn't even real. The candlelight didn't flicker like it used to. It trembled. The kind of light that knew it wasn't welcome, like me. I sat between two cousins I hadn't seen since Zinnia's high school graduation. Their children were already taller than me. Their laughter spilled across the table, unconcerned with the silence building behind my ribs. Gideon, my father, stood. His voice always carried even when no one asked him to speak. He raised his glass of Merlot, red as the roast bleeding on his plate. To family, he said with that goddamn politician smile. To health. To seeing Thalassa still looking good, his smile widened. Even if still alone, huh? And he laughed. It wasn't just a laugh. It was permission. Permission for the room to turn. Permission for every pair of eyes to scan me like I was a specimen still under review. The people I'd paid off debts for. The mouths I'd helped feed. They laughed too. Zinnia tilted her head. She didn't sip her wine, she flaunted it. All that ambition, and still no ring? That's tragic. They thought they were being witty, clever, charming even. But that wasn't charm. That was the kind of cruelty passed down like heirlooms. I smiled. Not because I felt joy, but because I'd learned to cover pain with politeness. That's what women like me were taught. If they shame you publicly, laugh softer. Looking back now, I should have stood up then. Zinnia's voice dripped across the table like honey spiked with glass. But hey, at least you've got that sleek little apartment. The one in Seattle, right? Smart move, not buying. That way no husband has anything to fight you for in a divorce. Gideon chuckled again, like he hadn't rehearsed that line with her. Like they hadn't practiced the setup and punchline before dinner. Marilla, my mother, patted her lips with a linen napkin like a woman applauding in Morse code. My fingers tightened around the base of my wine glass. Not to raise it, just to keep from shaking. The chicken on my plate had gone cold. I'd taken one bite. Maybe two. I couldn't remember. If I spoke now, it would sound too sharp, too practiced, too bitter. They didn't want honesty. They wanted entertainment. I guess I'm just hard to keep up with, I said, and the table laughed again, thinking I joined in. But I hadn't. Inside, something small and old had cracked. Something I didn't even know was still intact. Gideon turned to a cousin. She works in computers. Or finances. Some combination. She's our steady one. Steady one. Like a generator. Like a backup battery. He said it like a compliment. A reward for enduring silence. I had once believed that being dependable would earn me love. But that night I realized it only earned me requests. I looked around the table. Not one photo on these walls featured me, without Zinnia. Not one school portrait. Not one diploma. Even the family trip to Yellowstone cropped. I'd left early for work. Zinnia leaned over and whispered just loud enough. You know, if you ever want me to help you set up a dating profile, I've got connections. Her teeth gleamed. Veneers I helped finance, though no one ever asked me to. The room filled with laughter again.
It was thinner this time.
Less joyful. More like a pack. I forced a sip of my wine. Bitter. Sharp.
Cheap.
Much like this celebration. Looking back, I didn't recognize the version of myself who still thought silence could protect me. What was I even preserving? A family that only called when bills were due? That's where it all started. The knock came just as I placed my untouched glass back on the table. Not a hard knock, just enough to shift the energy. Laughter paused like someone had pressed mute. I didn't turn my head at first. I didn't need to. I could feel it in my shoulders, in the sudden drop of temperature behind my neck. A coldness that memory carried in silence. The door opened and in walked Daniel. Not alone. She was stunning in the kind of curated, expensive ways Zinnia loved to emulate. Dark red lipstick, champagne blonde hair, and a diamond that could slice through the awkward air now thick in the room. Her hand gripped his like a statement. Gideon stood as if the president had just walked in. "Daniel, you made it," he said, beaming like this wasn't the man who'd once left me without a word. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. My spine straightened out of instinct. It wasn't pain. It was paralysis. The kind you feel when you realize the ending wasn't the end. They just skipped your chapter. Daniel didn't make eye contact. Not at first. Not until Zinnia let out a gasp and whispered, "Oh wow, she's even taller than you." And everyone laughed, including him. He looked at me then, briefly, like I was someone he'd passed on a train once, familiar, but unimportant. I smiled. Or maybe I didn't. I felt my face move, but nothing else followed. The sound of my own heartbeat filled my ears, muting the buzz of conversation now resurrecting around me. I wanted to vanish, but something deeper, quieter said no.
You stay.
You stay and you remember everything. I excused myself from the table. No one stopped me. In the hallway, the lights were dimmer. A framed photo of Zinnia's high school prom still hung where mine never had. I leaned against the wall, letting the noise behind me blur. My phone buzzed. One new message. From Zinnia.
I didn't open it right away.
I already knew. Eventually, I tapped. "Hey, sis. Any chance you can help with the loan this month?" No context. No apology. No shame. I stared at the message like it had teeth. The kind that bite and smile at the same time. Not even a please. I didn't respond. I didn't feel anything yet. Just the slow, acidic boil of reality setting in. She wasn't embarrassed. Because none of them were. This was just routine. Looking back, I should have known this was the beginning of their unraveling. I slipped my phone into my purse and stepped back into the dining room. Daniel and his wife were seated now. Zinnia had moved closer to them, laughing at a story she clearly wasn't part of. Gideon refilled glasses. Marilla sliced a second pie. "Zinnia's really blown up lately," Marilla said to no one in particular. "That last brand deal? Incredible reach. She knows how to stay visible," Gideon added, lifting his fork without looking at me. "Not everyone can do that." I sat quietly, knife and fork still untouched. So this is what worth looks like to them. Not integrity, not support, not the sleepless nights I spent calculating how to keep their credit scores above water. Just exposure. Visibility. Zinnia flicked her hair and leaned toward Daniel's wife. "Did you see the engagement post? 30,000 likes. Daddy said it gave him chills." She was right. It did give him chills. But not the kind that love brings. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I was still being used, still being drained, but now publicly erased on top of it. I wasn't the black sheep. I was the invisible one, the engine they refused to see. And they were still tapping me for fuel. That's what broke me. Not the ex. Not the mocking. It was realizing I'd become a tool in their show. A wallet with a smile. I didn't say a word.
Not then.
Not when Marilla made a toast to family who lifts each other up. Not when Zinnia beamed like she was the foundation we all stood on. I just sat. And I counted. How many bills I'd paid. How many calls I'd answered when they needed something. Never when they didn't. How many birthdays I'd spent alone while wiring money to cover someone else's celebration. I didn't cry. I didn't fume. I waited. Because I knew something they didn't. I was done being steady. I was done being silent. I wasn't forgotten. I was mined, and they're still digging.
I didn't slam the door when I left.
I didn't speed through the rain-slicked streets. I didn't cry. I drove as if I had a glass of water balanced on the dashboard, and I couldn't afford to spill a single drop. My hand stayed locked at 10 and 2, my jaw clenched so tight I could feel a migraine blooming behind my left eye. The quiet hum of the tires on wet pavement became my only company. It started to rain again halfway through the bridge out of Tacoma, just a light drizzle, but enough to blur the red taillights ahead of me and mirror the haze growing in my chest. That's when my phone buzzed.
Once. Twice.
Then a third time, longer this time, vibrating with purpose, like it knew I shouldn't be ignoring it. I glanced over. A voice message.
Zinnia.
I should have waited. Should have pulled over. But instead, I tapped the notification and let her voice fill the car, crackling over the speakers like static laced with poison. Of course she'll pay. She always does. That's her thing. She owes us. It wasn't even said with malice. It was casual, thoughtless, like they were talking about a subscription someone else renews without complaint. And that someone was me. I nearly missed the next turn. I pulled into a gas station and parked under the flickering canopy lights. The engine clicked off. The rain whispered against the roof. I just sat there, her voice still echoing inside me, louder than the storm outside. Those words weren't new, but hearing them spoken aloud, with such certainty, as if it were natural that I footed the bill for their lives. That hit differently. I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel. A decade of quiet sacrifices, minimized into a single, flippant sentence. She didn't say my name in that voice note, but she didn't have to. I already knew where I stood. When I got home, I didn't bother turning on the lights. The darkness felt honest. I kicked off my soaked shoes, peeled my damp coat off, and walked straight to my desk like I was on autopilot. My fingers found the laptop and flipped it open. The glow of the screen cut through the dark like a surgical blade, cold, precise, unflinching. I logged into my bank account first. Then my PayPal, Venmo, email inbox. One tab became 6. Then 12. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, not exactly. But I found it. Proof. Tuition payments for colleges I didn't attend. Rent transfers for apartments I'd never lived in. Emergency funds sent late at night with promises of just until next week. Prescription refills for mom. Root canal coverage for dad. A last-minute plane ticket Zinnia was going to pay me back for, but never even acknowledged after she landed. And that was just the beginning. I scrolled further. $212 for Gideon's truck tires. He never told me he got them. Never even said thank you. The longer I looked, the clearer it became. I was their invisible safety net. The one they never checked on, but always expected to catch them.
And I did.
Quietly. Repeatedly. Never when they were proud. Never when I was hurting. Only when they needed something. Only when I could fix it. They didn't even ask anymore. It was assumed. Expected. Entitled. I started taking screenshots. One by one. File by file. Each saved image was a timestamp of my silence. Each folder I created became a monument to my own erasure. Medical. Utilities. Tuition. I didn't even realize I was categorizing until the folder count hit double digits. My whole adult life had been documented by bank transactions I was never supposed to see as evidence. I wasn't a daughter. I was a credit line. Sometime around 2 a.m., I remembered the shared Google Drive folder Marilla had sent last year. Whitlow Family Achievements. I hadn't opened it. I'd told her I was busy. The truth? I already knew I wouldn't be in it. But tonight, I clicked the link. There they were, Folders filled with slideshows and peppy music, inspirational fonts, glittery animations over smiling faces. Best moments of 2020. Family Christmas highlights. Our legacy. Birthday parties. College graduations. Baby showers. Zinnia receiving her diploma, champagne in hand. Marilla posing in a hospital bed with flowers I had sent her, but no mention of who sent them. Gideon grinning over a chocolate cake I ordered and paid for, not even tagged in the caption. And the beach trip. A weekend at a coastal house with all the cousins. Umbrellas in the sand. Fireworks. Matching shirts. I hadn't even known they went. Not a single text. Not a single photo. I looked for myself, anyway. Scanned each frame like a ghost trying to find a reflection. One photo. I appeared in exactly one photo. In the background.
Blurry.
Half-cropped. Holding a tray of drinks at what looked like someone's birthday. I wasn't even sure which one. The final slide read, "We're proud of who we are." That was the line that broke me. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I just closed the lid softly, like I was tucking away the last illusion. What I felt wasn't rage. Rage burns fast. This was colder. A quiet frost that settled over everything I thought was real. I downloaded the folder anyway. Then I went back into the email thread and deleted it.
I don't know why.
Maybe because keeping it felt like agreeing to it. And I'd done enough of that. I stared at the blue desktop screen until the brightness blurred my eyes. And then I whispered to no one. Even when I bought the cake, I wasn't invited to the table. And that was the clearest sentence I had spoken in years. The clock on the microwave blinked 2:17 a.m. when I finally peeled myself away from the screen. I hadn't realized how long I'd sat there, staring at evidence that I no longer had to convince myself was real. I wasn't delusional. I wasn't sensitive. I was used. The apartment was cold. Not winter cold, just the kind that seeped into your ribs when you're alone with too much truth. I crawled into bed, but my eyes didn't close. The ceiling above me stretched wide, empty, waiting for something I couldn't give it. Sleep didn't come, but the memory did. I was 14, standing barefoot in the kitchen. The linoleum floor felt sticky beneath my toes. I had an application for a summer engineering program clenched in my hand, creased from how tightly I'd been gripping it. I remember the headline, "Future STEM Scholars. All expenses paid." Gideon sat at the table, papers spread wide, coffee in hand. I hovered, heart pacing. "Dad?" I asked. He didn't look up. "I got into a program. It's competitive. I need to travel for 2 weeks." A long pause. Flip of a page. A sip of coffee. "You sure that's worth leaving home for?" he finally asked. "Dreams are fine, Thalassa, but women need to stay grounded. Marriage is your safety, not scholarships." Looking back now, I should have known then. They weren't raising me to fly. They were grounding me in expectation. My phone buzzed against the nightstand, yanking me back into the present. I didn't reach for it, but it kept going. Again. Again. The screen lit up with a single word. Mom. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Thalassa," Marilla said, breathless like I'd woken her instead of the other way around. "I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time." "It's early," I said flat. "Or late. Depends on how honest we're being tonight." She laughed softly, the kind that smoothed tension but added nothing. "I just wanted to check in after dinner. It was such a lovely evening, wasn't it?" I stared at the ceiling again. "Was it funny to you?" I asked. A pause. "What do you mean, sweetie?" Dad's toast. Zinnia's comments. The way everyone laughed like I was some punchline with a paycheck. She sighed. "You're overthinking again. You always do this." There it was. The family tone. wrapped in sugar, soaked in guilt. It was just teasing. Don't ruin the mood by making it more than it was. My chest tightened, not from surprise, but from how familiar this felt. Like muscle memory. Like every time they hurt me and expected me to apologize for noticing. I didn't yell. I just hung up. 10 seconds later, the text arrived. Sorry if you felt uncomfortable tonight. We love you. Don't overreact. That word, if. As if my pain was theoretical. I opened my banking app, thumb hovering over managed transfers. Rent for their house. Monthly medication autopay. A credit card I didn't use, but they did. The red cancel all button pulsed quietly like a heartbeat. I clicked it.
Confirmed.
Then sat still. My breathing evened out, not because I was calm, but because the storm had passed. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that wrecks in silence. I had given more than money. I'd given compliance, applause, attendance, and not once had it been enough. Another buzz, another message, email this time, subject line, urgent, health emergency. Attached was a bill from a hospital I didn't recognize. $4,973.32 for Marilla Whitlow. I opened it, studied it. The logo was off-center. Font mismatched. The address listed didn't exist when I searched it. Not desperation. This was calculation. It wasn't the first time. It probably wouldn't have been the last.
But now?
Now I knew what silence cost. Looking back now, I should have questioned them sooner. But tonight, I wasn't doubting myself. I was done explaining my absence to people who never noticed my presence. Quiet doesn't mean I'm passive. It means I'm watching. And I've seen enough. The sun barely made it past the clouds that morning, filtering through my window in thin, tired streaks. I sat at the edge of the bed with both feet planted on the floor, my hands resting in my lap like I was waiting to be called for judgment. The silence in the room didn't soothe me anymore. It made space for something sharper. Something ready. The phone call came just after 8. Thalassa, it's Mark from Vanguard Credit. I was reviewing your file this morning, and there's a loan, actually, 2, that have your name listed as cosigner. One's attached to a property in Tacoma. I didn't speak. My mouth moved, but nothing landed. Mark continued, voice cautious. I thought maybe it was a mistake, but the signatures match. I'm legally required to inform you that the account is past due and facing repossession proceedings. My name was on a loan. A loan for a house I didn't own. A house I hadn't lived in since college. A house I had saved from foreclosure. And now it was being used as collateral for something I never agreed to. I thanked him calmly, wrote down everything, then hung up and sat still for 5 full minutes.
They didn't just bleed me dry.
They forged the knife too. I stood up and began collecting every record. I didn't stop to dress, to eat, to breathe deeply. Just moved, printer on, folders open, documents stacking like bricks for a wall I never meant to build. Credit statements. Transfer confirmations. Old emails from Marilla. Just until payday. Text from Zinnia. Can you float me this month? Promise I'll pay you back. She never did. I printed screenshots of everything. Highlighted names. Circled dates. The red pen moved faster than my thoughts. It wasn't revenge. It was documentation. A case file, not a tantrum. By noon, my floor was covered in evidence. Like a crime scene without bodies. Just broken trust and legal exposure. I made a fresh pot of coffee, but didn't drink it. Just let it sit beside me, cooling next to Verity Tran's business card. She was a financial litigator, quiet, brilliant, and notoriously efficient. They thought I wouldn't fight. They forgot I worked in systems. I knew exactly where to look. At 1:03 p.m., I opened Instagram. Zinnia had posted a new photo. Chanel shopping bag in hand, grinning in front of a luxury spa. Caption: rewarding myself. Hard work pays off. I didn't roll my eyes. Didn't scream. I took a screenshot. Saved it to the same folder. This wasn't ambition. This was laundering through emotional debt. Every dollar I sent was repackaged into her image, her lifestyle, her illusion of independence. And they all clapped for it. Mom, Dad, her followers. I closed the app. It was time. I walked the 4 blocks to Verity's office, my folder so thick it barely fit my tote. The receptionist greeted me like I was early for surgery. Verity brought me into her glass-walled office and closed the door. I laid everything out. She didn't ask me why I was there. Just started reading. 30 minutes later, she looked up. You've got more than enough to press charges. Financial fraud. Identity misuse. Possibly even coercion. I exhaled, slow and even. Do you want closure, she asked, or justice? I looked her in the eye. I want both, but I'll settle for accountability. She nodded once, like she'd been waiting to hear those words all day. We began drafting the letter. Not a threat, a notice. Looking back, I should have drawn the line years ago. But I know this much now. They mistook my silence for consent. Let's fix that. I didn't wait for permission. I didn't wait until I felt ready. I didn't even wait until I stopped shaking. I just started with the wall. The living room had always been neutral, almost sterile. Gray walls, soft rugs and muted tones, a coffee table that looked more like set design than real life. I kept it clean, simple, organized. It was the one place in my world that hadn't collapsed, until I decided it would be the battlefield. That night, it became my war room. I opened every drawer, dug through every folder, unlocked the cloud storage I hadn't touched in years. Receipts, Venmo screenshots, insurance statements, emails, notarized letters I barely remembered signing.
Some I did sign.
Some I realized had my name, my handwriting, but not my consent, not my awareness. And all of it, every piece of it, pointed in one direction. I had been used. Systematically. Strategically. Quietly. I started with masking tape, sticking them side by side on the wall, trying to follow the trail of dates and transactions like red string in a detective show. But masking tape wasn't strong enough. The paper curled. Documents slipped. The truth deserves more than weak adhesion. I switched to pins. Metal.
Sharp. Permanent.
One by one, I built a mosaic of betrayal. There were medical bills, sizable ones, billed under my name for procedures I never had. Statements from credit cards I never opened, showing lavish charges I never made, but paid from my account anyway. Checks withdrawn from a shadow account tied to my social security number. Quiet theft wrapped in family names and obligations. They used my handwriting. They used my address. They used my silence. For years, I thought I was being helpful. That love looked like sacrifice. That family meant not keeping score. But the scoreboard was pinned across my wall now. It had never been love. It was accounting. And I'd been the line item holding it all together. They said I was dramatic. They said I remembered things wrong. But nothing speaks louder than data. I sat down at my laptop, took a breath, and hit record. I didn't bother with makeup or lighting. It wasn't a video for them. It was for me. My voice came out steadier than I expected. For 7 years, I funded every lie they lived. I didn't do it for gratitude. I did it because I thought that was love. But now I know better. I'm keeping this for the record. Because truth doesn't beg. It documents.
Click. Saved.
Then I created 3 folders: digital, backed up, password protected. One marked Verity, my lawyer. One marked County Investigator. And the third, labeled simply me. I wasn't sure why I needed that one. Maybe because after so many years of being erased, I needed at least one copy of the truth for myself. It was past midnight. My eyes were dry, my hands numb from pinning evidence. I was about to shut down when the email pinged. From County Records. Subject: Transfer notification. Urgent. I opened it without thinking, and my blood ran cold. The property in Tacoma, the one I saved from foreclosure 5 years ago, the one I paid insurance on without fail, was in the process of being transferred. Title change pending. Application filed under my name. Only I hadn't signed anything. They were selling it. They were selling the very house I had rescued and cutting me out of the sale. It was the final betrayal, but it didn't bring tears. It didn't even bring rage. It just made everything snap into focus. They weren't careless. They were calculated. They planned this, down to the timing, down to the fake signatures. They were hoping I wouldn't notice, or wouldn't fight back. But I noticed. I forwarded the email to Verity with only 2 words. Let's proceed. By 9 a.m. the next morning, I was sitting in her sleek downtown office, the city's skyline reflecting off the glass walls behind her. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. She reviewed the documents, flipping through them with surgical precision. Her brow furrowed, her pen tapped, her mouth pressed into a line. "This isn't a misunderstanding," she said finally, closing the binder with a soft snap that sounded louder than it should have. "It's fraud." I nodded. My voice was calm. "Then let's treat it as such." She began drafting the complaint, item by item. Bank fraud.
Forgery.
Identity misuse. Attempted property theft. Each term felt like a sentence I had waited years to write. Legal language, cold and exact, became the voice I'd never been allowed to have. Verity looked up only once. "Are you sure you want to do this? Because once we file, there's no going back." I met her eyes. They went back on me long before I ever considered going forward. By the time I left her office, the wheels were in motion. By 6 p.m., another email came. Subject: Transfer action suspended. Investigation opened. I didn't pour a drink. I didn't call anyone. I sat in my kitchen, water in hand, staring out the window as the sun dipped behind the city's edge. It wasn't celebration. It wasn't closure. But something had shifted. A silence had broken. For the first time, I wasn't cleaning up after them. I wasn't explaining myself. I wasn't reacting. I was initiating. And in that quiet moment, I realized I didn't need their apologies. I didn't even want them. What I wanted was movement, momentum, the next step. Truth doesn't beg. It serves notice. And mine had just been delivered. It started as a 30-second segment on a local Tacoma station, low-resolution footage, bad lighting, poor audio. But it was enough. I recognized the courthouse steps before the anchor even finished the headline. Fraud allegations spark family feud over property ownership. The camera panned to Zinnia first. She stood just outside the entrance in a beige coat I'd seen in a recent Instagram story. This time, she wasn't smiling. Her mascara had blurred just under one eye, just enough to look human. Behind her, Gideon kept his head down. No hand on her shoulder. No stern words to defend her. Just silence. Marilla stood beside them, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. The reporter held the mic out like she was offering it to a performer who forgot her lines. None of them spoke. But they didn't have to. That image, those faces, played every hour for the next 2 days. They wanted a spectacle. They got one. Just not the one they starred in. My phone vibrated on the table as the story looped again. News alerts. Messages. Links forwarded from college friends, ex-colleagues, even a neighbor I'd barely spoken to. Is this your family? Girl, this can't be real. And my favorite. You okay? This is wild. I didn't respond to any of them. I just kept watching. By the third replay, I could quote the anchor. Sources close to the case confirmed that a Seattle woman filed charges against her own family members, alleging identity misuse, forged documents, and attempts to transfer real estate without consent. While names have not been officially released, online speculation has been intense. Zinnia's social media went dark within 24 hours. Before she vanished, I saw the comments pile up like a digital avalanche. Is this how you paid for that spa trip? Wait, didn't your sister pay your tuition? Stealing from family? You should be ashamed. She tried to fight back. A live stream went up. She sat on her couch in a soft sweater, hair pulled back, no makeup. Her voice shook just enough to sound authentic. It's all a big misunderstanding, she said. You don't know what goes on inside a family. People twist things. People get hurt. I watched the full 12 minutes without flinching. Then I downloaded it and saved a copy. Let her rewrite the script. I have the receipts. Later that day, Verity texted me. Complaint accepted. Property title frozen. Press starting to circle. Hold steady. I replied, always have. 2 hours later, another notification hit my inbox. Legal notice. Assets frozen. Endorsement deals pulled. By nightfall, Zinnia's face disappeared from every campaign she'd once bragged about. The sponsored posts vanished. A boutique untagged her photo. And the condo? Eviction filed. She wouldn't call me. I knew that. But Marilla did. Her voice was tight, brittle. You have to stop this, she said, skipping even a hello. I let the silence stretch. Then answered. You didn't stop it when it started. She inhaled sharply, like I'd slapped her. I'm your mother, Thalassa. I used to believe that meant something.
Click.
No screaming. No crying. Just an end. That night, I opened the drawer beside my desk and pulled out the letter from my late father, not Gideon, but the man who raised me until he passed when I was 10. His handwriting sloped slightly to the right. You don't owe anyone who teaches you to disappear. I read that line 3 times. Then I lit a small candle, held the letter just above the flame, and watched the edges curl. Not because I wanted to forget him, but because I finally understood him. This isn't revenge. It's release. They taught me loyalty, but forgot to teach me limits. I'm teaching them now. By the time the hearing was called, I'd already buried any trace of hesitation. The courthouse smelled like old air and old paper. Polished shoes echoed down narrow halls. Everyone inside looked like they'd been waiting longer than they wanted to. I didn't wear black. I didn't wear navy. I wore gray. The kind of gray that told the room, I'm not here to mourn. I'm here to finish something. Marilla sat across from me, flanked by an attorney I didn't recognize. She wore her usual neutral tones, pearl earrings, and an expression that said, How dare you do this to us? She didn't nod.
I didn't wave.
The judge read the paperwork. Routine phrases, standard process. Then came the question, one that should have felt ordinary but didn't. Do you voluntarily terminate all financial dependency and obligation toward the listed individuals? Yes, I said. I've been cut off my whole life. I'm just signing the paperwork now. Marilla inhaled sharply, like the words hit something unguarded. Her eyes welled but didn't spill. Maybe for the first time, she realized I meant every word. I left the courthouse without looking back. Looking back was how they'd kept me tethered. Later that week, I returned to the house. Not to move back in, not to reclaim. Just to hand over what was never really mine. The nonprofit director met me on the porch. She was in her early 50s, kind eyes, calloused hands. We stood together in front of the property I'd once rescued from the brink of foreclosure. I handed her the deed. Use it to house women who no longer want to be someone's safety net. She nodded, understanding without needing to ask. The sign came down that afternoon. Whitlow etched in brass letters. I didn't take it with me. I didn't want the weight. When I turned to leave, I saw Zinnia leaning against her car across the street. She looked thinner, older, like the weight of pretending had finally worn out its welcome. You've made your point, she said, voice steady but eyes uncertain. Can we fix this? I paused.
No.
She blinked, as if I was supposed to say more. I didn't. I walked away, with the key still in my pocket.
Didn't toss it.
Didn't offer it. Just kept walking. Not because I was angry. Because I was done. In Seattle, my apartment felt cleaner than usual. Maybe it was the silence. Or maybe it was the absence of being needed. I made tea. Jasmine. Something light. No wine. No music. Just breath. I sat by the window and opened my laptop. Not to work. Not to dig through more paperwork. To write a new will. Everything clean. Everything simple. No more in case of emergencies. No more just until she gets on her feet. The line had been drawn. I emailed Verity the final bank statement. Subject: close file. Her reply came fast. Understood. You've done more than most ever do. I stared at the screen for a long time, then closed it. Justice isn't revenge. It's knowing they can't reach you anymore. They never saw me as family. I finally returned the favor. The kettle clicked off on its own. I hadn't heard it boiling. I stood in the kitchen, watching steam rise from the spout like a memory trying to lift itself from bone. There were no texts buzzing. No missed calls. No messages labeled urgent from numbers I recognized but hadn't saved. The silence didn't press on me anymore. It held me. I poured the water into a simple ceramic mug. No monogram. No family crest. Just plain. Honest. Mine. Across the room, morning light filtered through the gauzy curtains, casting a muted glow over the hardwood. Seattle was always quiet in the early hours, like the city was giving you time to collect yourself before asking anything of you. I sat down by the window, curled my hands around the mug, and let the stillness do what it needed to. It wasn't loneliness. It was unoccupied space. And I was finally filling it with me. I didn't realize how much of my life had been spoken in someone else's voice until I stopped answering. I wasn't waiting for birthdays, holidays, or apologies that always arrived dressed as expectations. I'd stopped calling it family when it stopped feeling like home. The letter came 2 days later. A thin envelope, no return address, just my name scrawled in Marilla's script, still perfect, still performative. Inside, one line. You've changed. No greeting. No signature. Just that. She was right. I didn't cry. I didn't clutch the letter or reread it for hidden meaning. I held it above the sink and lit a match. Some things don't need closure. Just a match. The flame curled the edge of the paper inward, blackened the ink, then consumed it without ceremony. I watched until it was gone. Later that week, I stood in the back of the crowd at a dedication ceremony. The house was no longer a Whitlow property. The nameplate had been removed, replaced by a brass plaque that read, "The Selah Home, for women rebuilding on their own terms." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The executive director gave a short speech, followed by a woman who had fled an abusive marriage with 2 kids and nothing else. I used to think survival was enough, she said. Now I want stability.
Dignity.
Ownership. Her voice shook. Mine didn't. I stood in the shade, hands clasped, and watched as the sun set behind the old white porch I used to walk up carrying grocery bags and guilt. This wasn't erasure. It was resurrection. I didn't wave when they clapped. I didn't pose for pictures. I slipped away before the reception, into the quiet of an early fall evening. Back home, I opened my journal and turned to the last used page. I didn't write much anymore, but that night it felt right. I'm not healed, but I'm free. And for now, that's more than enough. I left the journal open on the table, the ink still wet as I stood to pour myself another cup of tea. No wine. No need for numbing. The reflection in the window looked back at me without question.
Solid. Calm.
No longer invisible. Forgiveness isn't always a bridge. Sometimes, it's a locked door you choose never to open again. Sometimes the hardest truth to accept is that family doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes, it means sacrifice without acknowledgement, love without return, and boundaries that were never yours to set, until you do. What would you do if the people who raised you also erased you? If this story struck something in you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because there's more to uncover, more to heal, and more voices like yours that deserve to be heard.